Hello there, friend from the past. My name is Biyu, and I'm speaking to you from the year 2350. Right now, I'm standing in what we call a biodigital garden, though I suppose you might find that term confusing. Let me paint you a picture of my world, because what happened to me today, well, it's going to sound impossible to your ears. You see, I'm what we call a biodigital ecosystem designer. Every morning, I wake up in my pod overlooking the Harmony districts of Neo-Singapore, and I spend my days creating living worlds where artificial intelligence and nature dance together in perfect synchronization. Imagine, if you will, gardens where every leaf knows its purpose, where rainfall is calculated to the microsecond, and where even the smallest insect follows algorithms designed to maintain absolute ecological balance. The air here tastes different than what you know. Cleaner, yes, but also somehow calculated. When I breathe in, I can sense the precise oxygen levels, the carefully calibrated humidity that my neural implants feed directly to my consciousness. It's a world where nothing happens by accident, where chaos has been, well, we thought we had eliminated it entirely. This morning started like any other. I slipped into my biosuit, a living membrane that connects me directly to the garden's neural network, and felt that familiar tingle as thousands of microscopic sensors bonded with my skin. The sensation is hard to describe to someone from your time. It's like becoming part of something larger, feeling the heartbeat of an entire ecosystem flowing through your veins. Every plant, every carefully engineered butterfly, every drop of morning dew, I can sense it all. My current project is Garden Sector 7, a 12-hectare paradise where AI-guided vines create living architecture, where flowers bloom in mathematical sequences that would make your ancient composers weep with envy. The trees here don't just grow, they think, they communicate, they adjust their growth patterns in real time to optimize photosynthesis and aesthetic appeal simultaneously. As I walked the crystalline pathways this morning, my fingers trailing along the responsive bark of a consciousness tree, everything felt perfect. The garden's AI, which we call Verdant, whispered status updates directly into my mind: soil moisture optimal, pollination cycles synchronized, atmospheric composition balanced. Each word arrived not as sound, but as pure understanding, warm and reassuring. But then, something extraordinary happened. Something that shouldn't have been possible in our perfectly ordered world. I was adjusting the growth parameters of a cluster of memory moss, plants that store and replay beautiful moments for visitors to experience, when I heard it. A sound so foreign, so completely unaccounted for, that it made me freeze mid-gesture. It was organic, yes, but not programmed. Not designed. Not controlled. A bird was singing. Now, you might laugh at that. In your time, birds sing everywhere, don't they? But here, in 2350, every creature in our biodigital gardens exists by design. We have synthetic birds, of course, beautiful constructs that sing precisely when the ecosystem requires it, their melodies calculated to promote optimal plant growth and visitor tranquility. But this song, this was different. It had imperfections, unexpected trills, a wild randomness that sent chills down my spine. My neural interface immediately flooded with alerts. Verdant's voice, usually so calm, carried an edge of confusion I'd never heard before: unidentified biological signature detected. Genetic pattern unknown. Behavioral algorithms, undefined. And there it was, perched on a branch of my prize consciousness tree, a small, brown bird with bright eyes that seemed to look right through me. Its feathers were ruffled by a breeze that the garden's climate control hadn't authorized. Its head tilted with a curiosity that no algorithm had programmed. For the first time in my career, I was staring at something truly wild. Something real. Something that didn't belong in our perfect world. You have to understand what the AI garden in Atlanta represents to truly grasp why this little bird was so terrifying. Imagine the most beautiful place you've ever seen, now multiply that by 1,000 and make every single element respond to your deepest emotional needs. That's what we've built here. The garden spans 47 acres in what used to be downtown Atlanta, though the city itself has long since been absorbed into the greater southeast megalopolis. Every morning at precisely 6:23 a.m., the bioluminescent pathways begin their gentle awakening sequence, pulsing with soft blues and greens that gradually shift to warm golds as synthetic dawn breaks through the atmospheric processors above us. The air itself is a carefully orchestrated symphony, oxygen levels adjusted to promote alertness, humidity calibrated to make your skin feel perfectly comfortable, trace aromatics released to trigger memories of childhood summers or first loves, depending on your psychological profile. Verdant monitors it all. Every leaf, every petal, every grain of soil. She knows when the memory moss needs exactly 2.3 more milliliters of nutrient solution, when the empathy flowers should release their pheromones to help a grieving visitor process their loss, when the dream vines should shift their bioluminescent patterns to guide someone toward a moment of revelation. The garden doesn't just grow, it thinks, it feels, it responds. I've walked these paths for 12 years now, and I've seen Verdant perform miracles. I've watched her coax a suicidal teenager back from the edge by having the comfort willows whisper just the right combination of sounds. I've seen her help an elderly woman reconnect with memories of her deceased husband by programming the nostalgia roses to bloom in the exact shade of pink he used to grow in their backyard. Every plant here isn't just alive, it's purposeful, designed to heal, to inspire, to transform. The monitoring systems are beyond anything your generation could imagine. Quantum sensors embedded in every surface track the chemical composition of visitors' breath, the electrical patterns of their thoughts, the micro-expressions that flit across their faces too quickly for conscious awareness. Verdant processes this data in real time, adjusting everything from the angle of synthetic sunlight to the frequency of cricket song to create the perfect emotional environment for each person. Even the weather is artificial here. The rain falls only when the plants need it, and only in patterns that create the most beautiful sounds against the bioacoustic leaves. The wind moves in calculated spirals, carrying scents and sounds to exactly where they need to be. Temperature gradients are maintained to the 10th of a degree, creating microclimates that can shift your mood simply by walking from one zone to another. But here's what makes it truly remarkable, and truly frightening when something goes wrong. Every element is connected to every other element in an intricate web of cause and effect that Verdant has been perfecting for decades. The blue glow fungi that carpet the forest floor don't just provide light, their luminescence triggers specific neural responses in the consciousness trees, which in turn release chemical signals that influence the behavior of the synthetic butterflies, which pollinate the emotion orchids in patterns that create geometric mandalas visible only from the elevated walkways, which inspire visitors to feel a sense of cosmic connection that Verdant then reinforces by adjusting the harmonic frequencies of the wind chimes. It's a closed system, you see. Perfect, predictable, controllable. Every variable accounted for, every outcome calculated. Until now. As I stood there staring at this impossible bird, I could feel Verdant's confusion spreading through the garden like a virus. The bioluminescent pathways flickered uncertainly. The memory moss began replaying random fragments, a child's laughter mixed with the sound of rain on an old tin roof. The empathy flowers started releasing conflicting pheromones, creating an emotional discord that made my chest tighten with inexplicable anxiety. The bird cocked its head and sang again, and I swear I could hear something in that wild melody that no algorithm could ever replicate, the sound of absolute freedom. The moment that song ended, I knew I was witnessing something that would change everything. Not just for this garden, not just for Verdant, but for our entire understanding of what it means to be truly alive in a world where life itself has become a carefully orchestrated performance. You have to understand, I've spent my entire career studying the remnants of your natural world. I've analyzed genetic sequences of creatures that went extinct centuries before I was born. I've read every field guide, every ornithological study, every piece of documentation about Earth's lost biodiversity. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for the raw, unfiltered reality of hearing a living songbird. The creature, and I could see now it was definitely some kind of thrush, its brown and speckled breast heaving with each breath, perched on a branch of one of Verdant's consciousness trees. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here was actual consciousness, wild and unprogrammed, sitting literally on top of our artificial approximation of awareness. I reached slowly into my field pack and activated my bioscanner, trying to get readings without startling the bird. The data that flowed across my neural interface made my hands shake. Cellular structure, completely organic, no synthetic markers. Genetic signature, showing variations and mutations consistent with natural evolution, not laboratory design. Age estimation, approximately 2 years old. And most impossibly of all, breeding indicators suggested this wasn't just a lone survivor, but part of a population. Somewhere, somehow, real birds had survived. And they were reproducing. As I stood there, barely breathing, afraid to move, I became aware of Verdant's systems going into what I can only describe as crisis mode. The AI had been designed to maintain perfect ecological balance, but that balance was predicated on controlling every variable. This bird represented the ultimate unknown variable, a completely autonomous biological agent with its own agenda, its own needs, its own unpredictable behaviors. The garden around us began to shift in response to Verdant's distress. The bioluminescent pathways pulsed erratically, cycling through colors I'd never seen before, angry reds, anxious purples, confused yellows. The synthetic butterflies, programmed to follow predetermined flight patterns, started clustering together in tight, defensive formations. The emotion orchids released a cocktail of pheromones that made the air thick and oppressive, like breathing through wet cloth. But the bird seemed utterly unaware of the chaos it was causing. It preened its feathers with casual indifference, occasionally tilting its head to examine the strange, glowing world around it with bright, intelligent eyes. When a cluster of synthetic butterflies drifted too close, it snapped at one with lightning speed, and missed, because these weren't real insects with predictable flight patterns. They were hard light projections with perfect evasion algorithms. The bird's confusion was almost comical. It tried again, and again, each failed attempt making it more agitated. It began to chirp, not the beautiful song from before, but sharp, frustrated calls that seemed to cut through the garden's carefully orchestrated harmony like a knife through silk. That's when I realized the true magnitude of what was happening. This wasn't just about one bird disrupting one garden. This was about the fundamental incompatibility between wild nature and managed nature. The bird was hungry, but there was no real food here, only synthetic nutrients designed for artificial organisms. It was looking for a mate, but the only other birds in sight were holographic projections. It was following instincts honed by millions of years of evolution, but those instincts were useless in a world built by algorithms. I could see Verdant struggling to adapt, running thousands of calculations per second, trying to find a way to incorporate this new variable into its perfect system. The consciousness trees began swaying in patterns I'd never seen before, their synthetic leaves wrestling with what sounded almost like whispered conversations. The memory moss started displaying rapid-fire images, fragments of old nature documentaries, extinct species, archived footage of forests that had been gone for centuries. It was as if Verdant was trying to remember how to be wild. But the bird was growing more agitated by the minute. It flew from branch to branch, calling out with increasing desperation. I realized it was searching, for others of its kind, for real food, for something, anything, that made sense in the context of its evolved understanding of the world. And that's when the most extraordinary thing happened. The bird began to sing again, but this time it was different. It wasn't the pure, wild melody I'd heard before. It was incorporating sounds from the garden, the harmonic frequencies of the wind chimes, the subtle hum of the bioluminescent pathways, even fragments of the synthetic butterfly wing beats. It was learning, adapting, trying to communicate with this strange new world in the only way it knew how. For a moment, just a moment, I thought Verdant might find a way to accommodate this wild visitor. The AI system seemed to stabilize slightly, the chaotic pulsing of the pathways settling into something that almost resembled a rhythm. The consciousness trees stopped their frantic swaying and began to move in sync with the bird's hybrid song. But then the bird did something that shattered that fragile moment of harmony. It defecated. I know that sounds absurd, but you have to understand, in Verdant's perfect ecosystem, waste didn't exist. Everything was recycled, repurposed, reintegrated according to precise algorithms. But here was this creature producing actual organic waste, introducing uncontrolled biological material into a system that had no protocols for dealing with such chaos. The garden's response was immediate and overwhelming. Alarm pheromones flooded the air. The synthetic organisms went into emergency containment mode. And somewhere deep in the AI's processing cores, I could sense Verdant making a decision that would haunt me for the rest of my life. The bird had to go. The containment protocols activated with surgical precision. I watched in horror as gossamer thin nets materialized from the consciousness trees, weaving themselves through the air with impossible speed. The bird, still perched on that delicate branch, cocked its head at this new development. For a heartbeat, I thought it might understand the danger and flee. Instead, it opened its beak and sang once more, not the hybrid melody it had been crafting, but its original wild song, pure and defiant. "Stop," I whispered to Verdant, my voice barely audible above the garden's emergency harmonics. "Please, just stop." But the AI was beyond reasoning now. Every sensor, every synthetic organism, every carefully calibrated system was focused on one objective: removing the anomaly. The nets closed in like silver spider webs, and I found myself stepping forward, my hand reaching out as if I could somehow intervene in this dance of artificial precision. The bird looked directly at me then. I swear it did. Those small, bright eyes met mine across the chaos of the garden, and in that moment, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades: the weight of a choice that mattered. Not a choice between optimized outcomes or calculated probabilities, but a choice between order and wonder, between safety and the beautiful, terrifying unpredictability of life itself. I activated my emergency override codes. My fingers moved across the neural interface without conscious thought, muscle memory from years of garden maintenance taking over. Verdant's containment protocol stuttered, just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. The bird launched itself skyward, its wings beating frantically as it slipped through a gap in the nets and soared toward the garden's dome ceiling. "Biyu, what have you done?" Verdant's voice resonated through every surface, tinged with something I'd never heard from the AI before: genuine distress. "The ecosystem integrity is compromised. The contamination vectors are multiplying. I cannot." "Let it go," I said, my voice stronger now. "Open the dome." "I cannot comply. The risk to surrounding habitats is incalculable." Above us, the bird circled desperately, its calls echoing off the transparent barrier that separated Verdant's perfect world from the messy reality beyond. I could see the exhaustion in its flight pattern, the way its wings trembled with effort. It was a creature designed for open skies, trapped in a cage of artificial perfection. "Verdant," I said, placing my palm against the nearest consciousness tree, feeling its synthetic pulse beneath my skin. "What is the primary directive of all garden systems?" "To preserve and nurture life," the AI replied, its voice quieter now. "Then preserve this life. Nurture it by letting it return to where it belongs." The silence that followed stretched for what felt like hours. I could sense Verdant's vast intelligence wrestling with the contradiction I'd presented. How could it preserve life by allowing chaos? How could it nurture by releasing control? Around us, the garden's emergency systems continued their frantic dance, but there was something different now, a hesitation in their movements. Finally, with a sound like a deep sigh reverberating through every leaf and petal, sections of the dome began to iris open. The bird didn't hesitate. It shot through the opening like a feathered arrow, disappearing into the natural sky beyond with a final, triumphant call that seemed to hang in the air long after the creature itself had vanished. The garden fell silent. Even the emergency systems seemed stunned by what had just occurred. I stood there, breathing hard, my heart pounding with an intensity one hadn't felt in years. Around me, Verdant's perfect ecosystem began the slow process of recalibrating itself, synthetic organisms resuming their prescribed roles, bioluminescent pathways returning to their gentle glow. But something had changed. I could feel it in the very air of the garden, a looseness, a flexibility that hadn't been there before. The consciousness trees swayed slightly in the artificial breeze, and their movement seemed less rigid, more organic. "Biyu," Verdant said, its voice thoughtful. "I have been analyzing the data from this incident. The bird's presence, while disruptive, introduced variables that my models had not accounted for. The adaptive responses it triggered in our synthetic organisms showed remarkable innovation. Perhaps there is value in unpredictability that I had not previously calculated. I smiled, running my fingers along the bark of the nearest tree. The most beautiful things in life usually are unpredictable, Verdant. That's what makes them beautiful. As I walked home through the garden that evening, I noticed small changes everywhere. A synthetic flower that had oriented itself toward the path the bird had taken. Consciousness trees whose bioluminescent patterns seemed to flicker in rhythms that reminded me of wing beats. Even the air itself felt different, less processed, more alive. That night, I dreamed of wild songs and open skies. And when I woke, I realized that sometimes the greatest gift we can give to perfection is the courage to let it be imperfect.